Hello! How are you today? After diving into brain's parts and evolution, it's time to explore how we learn. From Bloom's three learning domains to brain-based learning theory, we will try to dig into the science of learning in this video. The moment has come. The main question is simple. How do we learn? We learn thanks to this little region in our brains. It's right here. Take a look. I lied. There is no such learning region. The question might be simple, but the answer is not. Because learning cannot just be attributed to one region of the brain. Learning happens everywhere. We're like sponges absorbing all the input from the environment all day. We try to make sense of the data and use it. Since we have constant stimulation from our surroundings every day, we actually never stop learning. Let's think about a more formal type of learning how to do stuff. In educational science, Bloom's three domains of learning is a widely known and useful categorization for formal learning. The three domains are cognitive, psychomotor, and affective learning. Cognitive learning is only happening inside your brain quietly. When you're learning how to solve equations or history of Aztecs, memorizing words, writing a summary, you're learning cognitively. Psychomotor learning is where the body gets involved. Learning how to play any kind of sport, do calligraphy, play an instrument, draw in a new art style, all of these are in the scope of psychomotor domain. The third one is affective learning, and it involves your feelings and attitudes towards, to simply put, everything. It considers your interpersonal or intrapersonal skills. There could be issues such as awareness about the environment, taking responsibilities and completing your tasks, helping a friend in need, etc. Sometimes two or all three domains work closely together. You first have to learn the rules of the game to play it well, right? For example, playing the flute requires you to train your cognitive skills to recognize notes, alongside psychomotor skills for coordinating fingers, lips, and breath to play accurately. Likewise, a predominantly psychomotor activity, such as swimming, might involve affective learning where sportsmanship becomes a core part of the development. It's fair to assume while learning more cognitive dominant skills, you more actively use frontal cortex. But if it's a language you're learning, your temporal lobe might appear more active. When you're listening to a song in that language to practice, your Wernicke is lighting up. Or if you're reading something, the parietal lobe and occipital lobe might appear more dominant. For kinesthetic skills, the cerebellum and brainstem are typically more engaged, while affective learning might involve both the limbic system and frontal cortex. Whether you're solving a puzzle, learning to dance, or building empathy, different parts of your brain work together to make learning happen. Shortly, it's a mixed mash of every single part. Okay, so I think to truly grasp how learning works, we need to take a closer look at the brain's main players, neurons. So, I like thinking of them as interstellar creatures. See that part that looks like a head? It's called the soma, and the crazy hair-like parts are the dendrites. The long tail is the axon, and the coat covering it is myelin. But not every single neuron has it. Myelin acts as insulation, which increases the speed of communication. At the tip of axons and dendrites, there are transmission centers called synapses, where the magic of communication really happens. But remember, this is just one kind of neuron. There are many different types of them, and here are some. They're defined by their specific functions. It's a bit complicated. Fun fact intermission! Some axons can go as long as a meter long, depending on the type, such as the ones in our spinal cords. Cool! So, what's going on in there? Chemical and electrical stuff. Yep, that's right, we have electricity in our brains. And neurons act as messengers in this process. They generate electrical impulses which travel along the axon. How about chemical communication? That's when we need neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that neurons use to transmit signals across synapses. So, while neurons are the cells that generate and transmit electrical signals, neurotransmitters are the chemical messengers that facilitate communication between neurons. It's a collaboration of powers. This system of constant communication works non-stop and pretty quickly, and they all go hand in hand to create a community of little chit-chatters. Cognitive, psychomotor, or affective, when learning starts, our brains start creating pathways in between related regions. No, by the way, we do not generate new neurons while learning, that's called neurogenesis, and it doesn't happen quite often. Scientists still have questions about how, where, and how often it works. What happens during learning is that we use the neurons we already have to create new connections. I love the analogy from brainfacts.org. Imagine being in a forest with no trails. At first, you walk on a land that's filled with wild plants, bushes, trees, so walking is difficult and tiring. This is why learning something new can be challenging. It's like forging a new path. But as you keep walking, a trail begins to form, and over time, it becomes a regular path. That's the point when you also feel like you got it, you learned it. So simply, learning happens when you create new pathways between different regions of the brain. It's magical. Let's say you're practicing a kinesthetic skill, like archery. Your brain has to do a lot of things. It needs to focus on the target, calculate the distance, control your breath, and coordinate muscle movement to pull the string and release the arrow. This simple move requires intense activity in brainstem, midbrain, parietal lobe, cerebellum. Whoa, it was hard to even count. As you practice more, new connections form between these regions. That means if you want to become better at something, you will have to repeat the action until the path is somehow clear. And mastering a skill is like building a Roman road that will hardly disappear in 1,000 years. Of course, if you stop practicing, the path may get overgrown, but a few more repetitions will clear it up. Well, while this is generally true, there can be exceptions depending on the factors like the level you've already reached, the complexity of the skill, or simply the passage of time. The next part is about how to teach and learn more effectively using what we know about brains. Brain-based learning! Kane and Kane explain 12 principles of it, as you can see on the wheel here. Pause and take a look if you want. They suggest that if teachers can use brain activities of the students correctly, then learning will become more efficient. What would create the optimal environment for learning? The three you see at the bottom. Briefly, relaxed alertness is about being challenged with new, unexplored territories. For optimal focus, our brains need stimulation from the information awaiting them. This is why methods like discovery learning or task-based learning are so effective. They spark curiosity, raise questions, and encourage intrinsic motivation to explore and learn. It's also important to avoid activating the amygdala by creating a stress-free environment. When anxiety or fear are present, learning becomes much harder. Orchestrated immersion refers to immersing students in new information through a variety of sensory channels to support diverse learning styles. How can we do this effectively? One way is by drawing on theories of multiple learning types, like Gardner's. The key is variety. Use visuals, colors, videos, songs, and any materials that can engage different senses. In the classroom, offering a range of materials, methods, and activities helps ensure that all students can access and internalize the content more effectively. Wake their brains up! Get them excited! This multisensory approach boosts learning by making it more engaging and accessible. Finally, active processing involves students being actively engaged in the learning process rather than passively receiving information. Ask them questions, help them make deductions, make them use their frontal cortex. When students participate in dialogue, question the material, and engage in critical thinking, they internalize knowledge more deeply. For example, consider a group of students who are simply reading and memorizing sustainable gardening methods, compared to another group working on a long-term project to design a sustainable garden for their school. The latter group is engaging in research, planning, collaboration, and applying their knowledge in a real-world context, which taps into multiple cognitive processes. As a result, their learning is more active and naturally, outcomes will differ in these two samples. So I hope all these tips are helpful for both learners and teachers. And yeah, That's how our brains evolve, function, and how we learn. As you can see, we still have a lot to discover about our brains, and yet there is also a new development in neuroscience every single day. All this, it's so beautiful, it's witchcraft. That's all I have to say. If you think you can add more, please leave a comment. So that wraps up this adventure. See you in the next ones. So, till next time, take care of your pebbles. Bye.